About time to get started. Most of the time this morning we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 14. And on Wednesday nights we're just studying just after this. This is just before we started studying. This is before David. This is pre-David. Chapter 14. Mm-hmm. We've been studying for several weeks how we can make life matter. This week we're going to look at another aspect of that. Let us go to the Lord in prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this first day of the week. We thank you so much for loving us, taking care of us, looking down over us. Thank you that we can call you Father, that we can feel like we are in the family with you, and that we can call on you with our thankfulness, our knowing that you are in control. We thank you for that. Also for the great hope that you give us through Jesus Christ, your Son. Dear Lord, help us as we study this morning, that we may study with open minds and open hearts to find out more about your word, more about what your word offers to us to help us live a life of servanthood. In Christ's name, amen. A lot of times, we see in the Bible, and we've studied in Vacation Bible School about the heroes of the Bible. And we have certain people that we mention when we study the heroes of the Bible. But yet there's other heroes that aren't emphasized sometimes. And sometimes living heroically doesn't mean you're in the spotlight. A lot of times being a hero means you're in the spotlight. Means that you're brought out. I mean, if you listen to the news, a lot of times they'll bring out people who have done things that are outstanding or exceptional, or we're at the right place at the right time a lot of times. But being a hero does not mean that you have to always be in the spotlight. And there's a lot of heroes in the Bible that aren't spotlighted. You know that when we think about the apostles, the ones that are mentioned the most and talked about the most are Peter, James, maybe some, John, some. And you've got Paul. But yet the rest of them weren't mentioned, but yet they all gave their life and were heroes because they gave their life to preach the gospel. So I guess what I'm saying is that just because your name is not in spotlights does not mean you can't live a life that's heroic. I think the example that we're going to look at today is Jonathan. He's one of those guys. He lived in the shadows of David. And David gets all the accolades, and Jonathan doesn't get a whole lot of accolades, but yet he was a hero. He was a hero. And we're going to look at him a little bit today and see how, as we live our lives, parents can be heroes. Helping out someone in need, you can become a hero. Doing something that's beyond the call of duty in your surroundings, you're a hero. And living a life like that, living a life that's exceptional, also makes our life matter. Makes our life matter. People that that take care of other people, people that look out for other people, people that are always out there doing good things, or always out there trying to help people out. They're heroes. Now, they don't make the front page of the newspaper a lot of times, but their life matters because of the things that they do and the way they act and the way they conduct themselves. Paul was a headliner. Barnabas was not. Same way with Silas and Paul and Silas. Peter was the headliner, but Andrew is the one who brought him to Christ and first introduced him to Christ before he turned his life over to Christ. Andrew didn't get in the spotlight, but Peter did. Peter did. And now we're going to talk about David and Jonathan. In the 14th chapter of the book of 1 Samuel, Jonathan is mentioned and talks about how he went into the camp of the Philistines to try to take over the Philistines. Him and his armor bearer went into this camp, and they kindly went in, snuck in there, and they killed several people and kept going and really turned the battle around for the Israelites, because the Israelites are pretty well were without weapons, without any kind of morale. So Jonathan took this on himself to do this, and it was quite a heroic act that he did. Now the day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come and let us cross over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." But he did not tell his father. So he was doing this without his father's knowledge. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is in Mingron, and the people who were with him were about 600 men. And Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ishkabob's, I was getting ready not to read this. I was going to let somebody else read all this. Ishkabob's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord of Shiloh, was wearing an ephod, and the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Okay, between the passes by which Jonathan sought to cross over to the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp crag on the one side and a sharp crag on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozis, and the name of the other Sanah. The one crag rose on the north opposite Mishmash, and the other on the south opposite Geba. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come and let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work for us, for the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few." His armor, now remember, this is all before David and Goliath, okay? This is all before David is introduced to us by Samuel. His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Turn yourself, and here I am with you according to your desire." Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and reveal ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hands, and this shall be the sign to us." So Jonathan is going to do this, but he's kind of wanting a positive sign from the Lord. So he go to the other side, and the people said to Saul, do what seems good to you. Therefore Saul said to the, wait a minute, that 2 pages might confuse everybody. When both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines said, behold, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have been hidden themselves. So this kind of threw them off. They thought all these Israelites were going to come out of all these holes, okay? So the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us and we will tell you something. And Jonathan said to the armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hands of Israel. So that was a sign. They told him to come on in, and that was a sign he was waiting for the Lord. If that's what they said, that he was going to go on in and fight. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hands of Israel. Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet with his armor bearer behind him, and they fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, put some to death after him. The first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within about half a furrow in an acre of land. And there was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. Even the garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked, so that it became a great trembling. Now, Saul's watchman is in Gibeah of Benjamin, looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went here and there. Saul said to the people who were with him, number now and see who has gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. Then Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of the God here, for the ark of God was at the time with the sons of Israel. While Saul talked to the priests, the commotion in the camp of the Philistines continued and increased. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them all around the camp, even they all turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled, even they also pursued them closely in the battle. So the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Beth-haven. It was quite an unusual situation here. Jonathan took great courage in doing this. We find out that Jonathan was a pretty good warrior. He was able to hold his own when it came to fighting and being a warrior for the Israelites. Yet he did this on his own. It wasn't something that he was asked to do. And he went out and he actually drove the Philistines back through his act and through God. And he believed that God helped him in this situation. So he chose something that was going to be good for Israel. He prayed to God, he prayed to the Lord that he would look after him. And he went ahead and did it. And how many of you heard this story before? Some of you probably have. Have you heard this story before? Have you read this story before about how he does this? Because it's not a widespread story about Jonathan. But it does show us that here's a man, he was a prince, he was in line to be king, but yet he showed that he could be a hero also in his own right. Now we know later on that David made the big splash on the scene with the killing of Goliath. And we know at this time that also that Jonathan was about 30 years old. He lived in the royal court. We find out that he had great leadership abilities. But that's not what made him a hero. What made him a hero is he took action. And we see from this one of the characteristics of Jonathan, which was faith. Faith was one of his main characteristics that he had. He had faith. He had faith that God would help him out in this situation. And yet he was living with a father that was becoming more faithlessness all the time, unfaithfulness all the time. But he didn't go in that direction. He did not go in that direction. He was a man of faith. That's the first thing I want to look at. He made this secret plan that he was going to try to help out the Israelites in their battle. And you got to understand that it was always, the Philistines were always battling them, trying to take land over here and there. And that was a constant thing going on. And it continued going on for years after that. But he was going to make the plan because the Israelites were really, Saul was making some bad decisions, and we're going to see one of those later on in chapter 14. But Saul was making some bad decisions, and he was faltering as a leader over his command. And yet Jonathan felt with all his heart that he wasn't looking to be a hero, but he became one. But he became one because of his faith in God. He was also a man of honor. And we see that as we go on in chapter 14. In chapter 20, chapter 14, verse 24, it says, "Now the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day, so Saul had put people under oath, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and until I have avenged myself on my enemies.' So none of the people tasted food." Now, I don't know what you think, but I think that I want to have a good meal and have it settle in, and before I start to battle and to fight. Saul was just impulsive and said, "We're not going to eat until we defeat the enemies." Not really a good idea, I don't think. Verse 25 says, "All the people of the land entered the forest and there." And remember the statement that we find that the land of Canaan was a land of milk and honey. Remember that statement? He says, "Oh, we want to go to this land because it's milk and honey." Look at this. They entered the forest and there was honey on the ground. When the people entered the forest, behold, there was a flow of honey. But no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard when his father put the people under oath. Therefore he put out the end of his staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the people said, "Your father strictly put the people under oath, saying, 'Cursed be the man who eats food today.' And the people were worried. Then Jonathan said, 'My father has troubled the land. See now how my eyes have brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. How much more if only the people had eaten freely today of the spoils of their enemies, which they found. For now they slaughter among the Philistines has not been great. They struck among the Philistines that day from Michmash to Jalan, and the people were very weary. The people rushed greedily upon the spoils and took sheep and oxen and calves and slew them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Then they told Saul, saying, 'Behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood.' And he said, 'You have acted treacherously. Roll a great stone to me today.' Saul said, 'Disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, each one of you bring me his oxen or his sheep and slaughter it here and eat, and do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood.' Saul. The people that night brought each one his ox with him and slaughtered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Obviously, the priests usually built the altars, but Saul had seen it done before, so he kind of knew how to do it. So that's why it says it's the first one that he built. Most of the time, it was built by one of the priests or prophets. Then Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and take spoils among them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them." And they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." So the priest said, "Let us draw near to God here." And then he gets into, Saul inquired of God, "Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel?" But he did not answer him on that day. Saul said, "Draw near here, all you chiefs of the people, and investigate and see how this sin has happened today. For as the Lord lives, who delivers Israel through, though it is in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die." But not one of all the people answered him. The people did not want Jonathan to be put to death because he ate the honey. In fact, they knew what he had done. They knew that the battle was going to be theirs because of Jonathan. So Jonathan, in his honesty and in his honor, and this is tough to do sometimes because in this particular case, his punishment was going to be death because he had eaten when the king had said, "Do not eat." But then, in verse 40, then he said to all Israel, "You shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side." And the people said to Saul, "Do what seems good to you." Therefore Saul said to the Lord, the God of Israel, "Give a perfect lot." And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. Saul said, "Cast lots between me and Jonathan my son." And Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done." So Jonathan told him and said, "I indeed tasted a little honey with the end of the staff that is in my hand. Here I am, I must die." Saul said, "My God, do this to me, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan." But the people said to Saul, "Must Jonathan die, who has brought about the great deliverance in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day." So the people rescued Jonathan, and he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. A man of honor, even when it's tough. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes being a hero is saying something that is not going to be popular and taking responsibility for an action or something that we've done that was not right. It's not right. Taking responsibility. It was a poor decision. Was it godly wrong to eat the honey? No, it was not. But it was against the king. It was against Saul. And yet here, he has to stand his ground and say, after he has fought for Israel, saved them, and then all of a sudden, he has to tell the people that I did not do what my father asked to do. I did not do what the king asked me to do. So I must die. Now he was saved by the people who recognized the honor and the heroism of Jonathan. But he was a man of honor. Now we're talking about a guy that's not mentioned a whole lot in the scriptures. This chapter, and then he's a sidebar in David's struggles as he tries to get away from Saul. But he's just that sidebar is all he is. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not wrong to be a sidebar. It's not wrong to do heroic things. And each and every one of us can do something heroic. And it will make our lives so much more meaningful. It will make our lives matter in somebody else's life. And I think that's the lesson here, that being a hero does not mean you're going to be on the front page of the newspaper or the news. It doesn't have to be that. There's some people in here that have done some very, very, very kind things to other people, and very few people even know about it. And I think that says a lot for them. It says a lot for them. Sometimes I learn later on, when a person, years later, what they did at a certain time. And I thought, wow, that person's heart was in the right place when they did that. That was a nice thing that they did. The last part of Jonathan's life that I want to talk about is the fact that he was a man of love. He cared for David. In 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 1. We've jumped forward in the story now. David has been anointed. He is, and now he struggles with the king, Saul. And now Saul told Jonathan, his son, and all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, greatly delighted in David. David and Jonathan had a special relationship. I think that their relationship really, really connected because they both had great faith in God. Would someone like to comment on that? Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that? That was the correcting element there? That was the thing that held them together? That was the thing that kept them, that made them like each other so much? They respected each other, and they loved each other. And I think that it shows where Jonathan actually went against his father because of some of the irrational decisions that his dad was making. And yet later, as time went on, he realized that David was going to be the apparent heir of Israel. He was going to be king. And what would that do to Jonathan? What would that do to Jonathan if David became king? He'd be kicked out. Yeah, he'd be an ordinary person. And on Wednesday night we've been studying how a lot of times, or upon occasion, kings would actually, when they got in, they would just kill all the rest of the families that were heirs to that king, so that they wouldn't be taken down. So in light of that, he's even realizes that maybe he felt like David would be a better king than he would. But he doesn't let that stand in his way, in his friendship, or in his something. You know, sometimes ego gets in the way of some of our friendships at times, where two people may be trying for the same thing, or doing the same thing, or wanting the same things, and that gets in the way sometimes of the important things. The fact that we all have a common bond in here. there is a common thread that holds us all together. We have our differences, personality differences, I don't know, knowledge differences, all kinds of differences. But yet, the thing that can hold us always together is Jesus Christ and our faith in him. And I think that that's what held Jonathan and David together, even through the difficulties, through the Saul trying to chase him down and kill him. And I think that that's probably also shows that what's important to Jonathan.
Jonathan didn't hesitate to tell David what he'd done later in life. He was his friend, but he knew.
I think that has to do with his honor part. I think Jonathan was a very honorable person. And yet sometimes, like I said, he's one of those secondary figures in the Bible, not one of those primary figures. And yet every one of us can be one of those types of heroes that has faith, that has honor, that has love for our fellow Christians, and a desire to bring people to Christ. That makes us a hero. That makes us a hero in God's sight, and that's who cares. That's who matters. That's who matters. That's who matters. We can be someone's hero. Heroes, not all heroes get the first page of the newspaper, as I said. When we think of the heroes of 1 Samuel, we automatically think of David standing over the giant. But yet, the story of Jonathan is an equally heroic story. You don't have to kill giants to be a hero. You just have to do what Luke 10:27 says. And it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. That says it all in being a hero. That says it all in our life. That if we strive to do those things, then we will be a hero. We will be a hero. And I know we have heroes right in here that maybe some people don't even know about. People that have done good things and are heroes in other people's lives. God appreciates that. God appreciates that. Any questions? Comments? I did all the talking today. Don't trust me. I'll get it when I get to the car. You're preaching again, Dave. Any questions, comments? You talk about David. We'll talk about Jonathan. Any comments on Jonathan? Interesting individual. Interesting individual. All right. Thank you very much.